IVM.
Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Ashwini Deshpande with us on AudioGyan, co-founder and director of Elephant Design Studio in Pune and Singapore. She's a 1989 graduate of NID Ahmedabad. She's a designer, mentor, jury, and active founding member of ADI. You can find most of her work and a huge body of all the projects she has done online and a lot of interviews documented online. But today we are here to discuss more about her design philosophy. So thank you, Ashwini, for giving your time, and it's a real honor to have you on AudioGyan.
Thank you, Kedar. It's absolutely wonderful to be talking to you.
Yeah. And I'm hoping to have a conversation which is slightly more philosophical because I've been following your work for quite some time, and I've seen that you've started almost 30 years back, which I'll speak about in the later half.
Sure.
But you also are active in communicating your design philosophies and ideologies to the new age designers as
Sure.
well. So that's where I have come up with this topic called new and old school design.
Okay.
And let's see where we go. And obviously, you must have answered, and even I've heard your answers online on YouTube saying, what's your design philosophy? So I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
But I want to ask you a slightly more abstract question, which is, what are the parameters? What parameters your definition of design has been changing? On what parameters, right? I mean, if you can give us a brief walkthrough, these were
Okay.
the few
Okay.
key elements on which you gauge your work, other work, work happening in the society at large, and
Sure.
those parameters in general.
Sure. So, as we all have been seeing, design is the most misunderstood, misused, abused word. Having something designer used to be this quote unquote word many years ago for people who would do just an outside change, a cosmetic change into something and say we have a designer range coming out. But I think my journey, and it's been really a long journey, yes, 30 years. I hope it doesn't mean old school, it just means the years, which is just a number. My tryst with design, I think, was when I was a kid, and my first memory of anything which is called design is a very colorful, patterned curtain inside my house. And it seems as a kid, as a toddler, I used to giggle when I looked at that curtain. And I suppose the colors or the pattern or the texture did something to my senses, right? So I could feel it, touch it, look at it, feel good about it. And I don't think that basic understanding of what design does to a person really changes over the years. So if there is a designed object or service or product or experience, anything at all that it is supposed to do is make it more approachable, make it more accessible, make people feel good about it, delighted about it, make something easy than it used to be before. So I think all that is very much there, and there is this very simple filter that, does it work and does it look good? And if you have no on any one of those, then maybe you have to revisit what you're doing. So I think it's not a big philosophy, it's very simple. And sometimes we use this very English word in our studio, which is prettify. Okay, so sometimes you get a project that lands up asking just prettification. And as designers with experience, we know we can do much more, right? So we have this bug. So we would go back to the project and say, is that all we can do? What if we did this as well? And what if we did that as well? And interestingly, no client who's coming with a project is going to refuse doing something better, right? I mean, even if the ask of the project is just make it look good, if you're adding many other things to it, nobody's going to say no to it. It's just that designers sometimes fail to push that boundary and sort of feel satisfied that I've done it, I've achieved it, I've removed all the pain points, now what else? So I think what has changed really over the years is if I were to start at something from an outside, like a skin, my understanding of design in my early years as a design student, as I was just beginning to learn anything formally, was that design is kind of a last layer.
Hmm.
which is the cosmetic layer, which makes things look good, attractive, and of course, people like to possess those.
Aesthetics is the result. Yeah.
Absolutely, the aesthetics. And then slowly you start moving towards the core. And then slowly you realize no, it can't just look good, it has to work well, it has to work better than it used to before. And for that, what do you need to do? You need to change a few things. You need to probably change the way you're looking at the whole problem itself. And then the next layer, which is really the core, which is the experience. Has the whole experience become better? So it's not just the first layer of looking good, second layer of, working better. The third layer is it changing something for good? Is it making a bigger difference at the core itself? And then once you make that bigger difference at the core, how it looks becomes kind of incidental. It falls in place. How it works falls in place. If you've taken care of the core of making a positive difference to anything that you're handling. So I think that is what probably has been the journey. And now it's like we say design is a way of life. So anything that we are doing, are we looking at who is it intended for? What is the consequence of what I'm doing? And is that a good consequence or not a desirable consequence? So yeah, from aesthetics, patterns, colors to, life itself, I think that has been the change in how I look at design.
I have actually two points here, and if you can elaborate more on
Sure.
that. So one is how and when did we as humans realize that design is more than aesthetics, right? And second is it an inherent quality, or so only prettification is a really
You're
intangible.
using the word well.
Is it really? I assume that it's a more intangible thing. So to
Sure.
bring tangibility, to bring more credibility to what you're doing, how
Yeah,
you're adding
yeah.
value, the new layer is added, or is it inherent? So actually, this is the first question. And if it's inherent, then how did we explore or discover this?
So discover what? Meaning the core of it or
Yeah.
the outer layer?
No, the inner layer.
So
Because I'm very sure we can go to a hammer as a basic example.
yes, absolutely. I
But
mean, yeah, hammer was the first thing, or the cave paintings that happened, but they didn't happen for art. I think the cave paintings happened for storytelling. People who lived in that age wanted to tell a story about how they lived. And the way they expressed it was through those figurines, right? Those figures that they drew on their walls, which we can see even now. So I think the aim was not prettification. The aim was to tell a story, and I think that's a beautiful inspiration for anyone who's trying to do anything which is visual. Because I'm a communication designer, visual communication designer, and a lot of times we are asked questions like, "Can graphic design really make a difference?" And I think that example is what we really need to refer to then, because the caveman was trying to tell a story, and the man or the woman did tell the story very effectively. We look at it even today after thousands of years, and we know what story it was, how were they living, what was their community structure, or how were they eating, or who were they killing, and so on. And we know the story even today because they tried to tell the story. It's not about their art or their skill of drawing a human figure with perfect proportions. So then you realize that the message or the story is far more important, and visual design is a medium to express it. So then your expression could be really pretty, but if you don't have the content, if you have no story to tell, then it sort of falls short of a lot of other things. Then it fails to engage. And the whole point of design, if anybody were to experience design and benefit from it, the person first needs to engage with it. So for engaging, the prettification works, and I think that it has its own place. So I'm not denying that a skill of prettification is of no use. That's great to engage or hold somebody's attention or stop somebody and notice something. But beyond that, if it's not telling you a message, not telling you a story which is meaningful to you or relevant to you, which is the core really, then it's going to fail to do what it's supposed to do. So I think there is a balance. So as you reach the inner core, you probably hone your skills of telling a better story or finding a better story to tell. I think that's the core then.
So form follows function is just
Oops. No, we
No.
won't get there.
no. I'm just saying it is just a better articulation, but inherently we are doing that.
We are.
Knowingly or unknowingly?
We are. That's true. And I mean, I come from the school and we come from the country where function is of utmost importance. I mean, we are not really in the space where we'll be probably designing aesthetics of skateboards and stuff. We are actually, in our country, the majority of the population is struggling to get their basic functionalities met. So if we can't make a comfortable chair, I mean, we have really failed then, right? Because the same plastic can make a comfortable chair as well and an uncomfortable one. The same plastic can make a stackable chair and a non-stackable one, right? So I think if we fail to do this functionality, then in India, really, we have no place. And I come from, I mean, if you were to call me old school, then that is what I come from, that every design must have a purpose.
Correct. In fact, this naturally segues into my next question.
Yeah.
And this is mainly you speak at various events, conferences, you take workshops and a lot of other things. So
Yeah.
again, it could be my observation, but I wanted to generally ask you that I recently attended Design Up and I also attended PDF.
Yeah.
And these are just two instances, not
Sure.
really in particularly those two festivals or conferences. But what I've observed is as I'm getting deeper into the art and the design industry of India through AudioGAN, I've observed there are two schools, right? One which is exploring and pushing the boundaries in terms of tech. So at some conferences, you will see a lot of people speaking about animation and
Right.
how do you push the envelope of products like
Yeah.
Uber and Ola and Swiggy. And on the other side, these IDC or NID type schools, they are trying to go to a much more grassroots level. So I'm sure as a designer, I feel enriched if I get both the worlds.
Sure.
But for a designer, what would be your, not a tip, but whatever you call it, how do they enrich themselves by living both? Or maybe just pros and cons of both the sides?
Sure. So I think, first of all, anything at all in India, if it is bringing the designer community together and making them into a voice, it's most welcome. Whether it is from the technology side, or it is from the skills side, or it is from thought side, or it is just from having fun. I mean, if there is just a beer mixer where designers come together and do a meaningful conversation, even that is great. Because I think first of all, this is a young profession. Secondly, it's a very, very limited profession by the number of people who are in it. So for the longest time, India just had 2 design institutes. I mean, when I went to NID, they used to take 25 people in one batch. And we are a country of 1 billion people. And if we have to make a difference, if a profession, any profession, if it has to make a difference in the country, in the community, in the society, it needs some basic mass, right? Some number, some critical mass. And if we remain scattered, we never come together, talk about what we can do, how our profession can make a difference, or what we want from anybody else so that our profession can do better, we'll never get there. So I am extremely happy that there are more conferences happening. Somebody last year was saying that, oh, in Bangalore, there are too many conferences happening. But I think I love that, actually, because, make designers come together. That's the only way they can figure what the others are doing. And that's the only way how we will know how we can impact anything at all. So coming back to the specific 2 conferences that you spoke about, I think what's interesting in both of them, and content obviously is different, and as you're rightly saying, one is tech centered and another is probably more thought or conceptual centered. But what is interesting in both these, and I think that's a format that works for a profession like ours, is they're very interactive. So it's not like a speaker comes and one way delivers a talk and goes away. In both these conferences, there are a lot of interactive sessions. So people get a chance to speak to each other. They get a chance to ask questions to speakers. They get a chance to be up close with anybody who's anybody in that profession, who's who, or whatever the rock stars. We don't have really any rock stars in design yet, but whoever are on their way, you get to meet them and you get to see what they're doing, how they're thinking. And I think that format is what is really interesting, and that should remain, whether it is done by Design Up, or it is done by Curious, or it is done by of course, the Pune Design Festival, which started 14 years ago, or it is done by CII. Anybody at all who's getting designers together, I think it's great as long as it remains interactive. because otherwise we can, watch YouTube videos of talks, and that's the same value as well as sitting in an audience and not interacting with the speaker. I also believe, and as a design school, we had a lot of this, that you learn a lot from your peers. So it's not just your professors who teach you the 5 years of NID that I went through, but I think we learned a lot from a batch senior, a batch junior, my batch, and so on. I think that also happens at these conferences. And I see a lot of that happening at both Design Up as well as PDF, that people are looking forward to meeting other people and discussing things. So I think more the merrier. I mean, let the design community get together and do something.
No, but I don't know. I keep swinging between this classic school versus the new age.
It's not new age anymore. It's already,
Yeah.
whatever, 10 years or whatever.
No, I mean, let me put it this way, because I was there in one of the panel discussions, and one of the speakers said that we have solved most of the problems.
Yes,
Right?
I remember this. Yes.
Yeah. And I was on the other side saying, boss, we have not even scratched the surface yet.
Right.
So there is this, say, A.G. Rao, who's working in the craft business.
Yes.
It was a whole new world for me, right?
True.
And then people living in Kashmir, and how
Yes.
are those handicraft people
Yeah.
are being empowered to create. So there, like for me, the design canvas is just suddenly widened, and it has now become almost infinite that I
Right.
can comprehend.
Right.
So if you can highlight what are the domains where design needs maximum impact, where design needs maximum attention, and secondly, then which can really bring impact to the masses.
Sure. So, in reality, design can actually impact positively to anything at all. You can apply design thinking to most domains, verticals, technologies, services, everything at all. But I think we have a very acute problem rising in India, and many of us experience this very much within our homes as well. We have elderly people in our homes, and we see them struggling with their devices and phones and even furniture and various other things. And I believe the year I was born, I believe the life expectancy was less than 50 in India, and I think today it is about 70. So in the 50 odd years of my life, I've seen it growing by 20 plus years, which means it's going to grow further. So we're going to have a really large aging population in a country that has absolutely no systems set for elderly population. There is nothing made friendly for them. I mean, if I was to be, I don't know how I'll be when I'm 70 or 75, but if I was to come to the studio, which is not accessible, so there is nothing that's built for the elderly in India. So I think the impact of design will be largest in the coming years if designers are able to focus on making lives easier for the elderly. And at Elephant, we have taken some steps as well on this. So last year we were looking at exactly the question you asked. We said, what is the area where we can impact the most? And nobody's coming forward and giving us projects in that area. Which also means that most of the commercial organizations have neglected the power of what elderly can do for them, or power of what they can do for the elderly. Mind you, this middle class elderly population even has spending power, huge spending power, but they are neglected. So we started looking at what is it that we can do for the elderly, and it's much easier said than done, because we had to talk to dozens of elderly people to even understand what are the areas in which we could make an impact. It's very easy to say, let me design something for the elderly, but what do you design? What is it that they really want? Because I again heard a very recent statistics that 50% of the startups fail because people didn't need that idea. So we didn't want to be doing something that people don't need. So we really wanted to understand what they need. And then we classified it into various aspects of their life, aspects of, some things are entertainment, some things are community, some things are about feeling lonely, some things are about functionality of objects. And then we started building ideas around it. And we are just on the way. We have not yet reached anywhere, but there are all kinds of ideas that are needed for them. So I think this is one space. Not to forget, of course, people with disabilities. In India, I think it's the most difficult life for a person who has even one faculty less, and nothing is built or made for that person. I'm going to go a step further and tell you that this world is designed for an average 5 feet 6 inches, 65 kg male, white male.
Mhm.
Okay, the whole world is designed for them.
Mhm.
It's not designed for anybody else. So all the ergonomic proportions, the air conditioning temperature that is considered a norm, which is whatever 22, 23 degrees, is actually set for that middle-aged, that height, weight, white male.
Mhm.
So it's no wonder that many of us feel uncomfortable in those temperatures because the world is not built for us. The tread of the steps that we came from is also built for that male. Okay.
Mhm.
So the world needs to be designed being inclusive. So there's so much to do. I mean, I don't know who says that everything is done. There
Mhm.
is so much to do.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. It's a man. It just
Yeah,
keeps. It
it's
just.
mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
world is just not designed for everybody.
Mhm.
So let's start.
In fact, the day before yesterday for elections, I'd gone to the camp where the election
Okay.
was happening, and there were steps,
Yeah.
and the steps were quite inclined, and there was a ramp just put for
Yes.
a
Yes.
wheelchair, but the ramp, like, at
I
least
know.
two people
I know.
need to push
I know
someone.
exactly what you mean. I
Yeah,
experienced the exact same
yeah,
thing. Yes.
yeah. It's very bad. I believe, like, at least I've been to Singapore. Singapore is like most accessible,
It is very
friendly.
accessible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ashwini, I want to just go back
Mm-hmm.
because this conversation is leading to elephant and more about it, but I'll come in the last part of the conversation for this.
Sure.
Can you tell us like few milestones in the Indian design landscape which has disrupted, impacted, or any other thing in the last 3 decades? Because that's your
That's the time.
karma bhumi.
It's not just my karma bhumi. It's Indian design's karma bhumi because we are the oldest, largest multidisciplinary design company India has.
Mhm.
There were a lot of others who started, but somewhere along the way didn't really sustain. So that's unfortunate. And I will always say this, that we need 100 design companies of our scale at least, if nothing more. More is welcome because we learn from that how to scale up. We don't know how to scale up beyond a certain point, but so these 3 decades have been interesting because when we started, I don't think there was anything called business of design. Okay, so it's hard to believe today, but in 1989, when we would quote somebody a thing called design fees, invariably they would get back to us and say, we understand everything else on your fee proposal, which is, number of prints or visit fees or anything at all, travel, material costs, mock-ups, everything. What is this component called design fees? We've never paid this before. So from a time where our time was not valued at all to a time where I'm sitting here and talking to you about 30 years, right? So I think it's really come a long way. And I won't say, we were the only ones who made it happen, but I think a large part of it changed when India sort of in the late 90s started getting a little more liberalized towards businesses. So in the early years, let's say 4-5 years of Elephant, we sort of managed to survive because expectations were really low. We were happy if we just got a project, no matter what the fees were. Also, fortunately for us, our first project was really large, so we managed to survive. But after this liberalization, what really happened is Indian businesses could go outside and sell their goods, and MNCs would come to India and sell their goods. That's really what happened, right? In simple words. And the moment Indian goods sat next to foreign goods, you could see the difference in various parameters. Number one was, of course, the manufacturing quality, but the other one was, or the fit and finish, but the other one was the design itself. The Indian conglomerates had really not invested in making their products better because they had no need to, because they were competing a similar somebody who had not invested in design. So as a consumer or a user or a customer, the choice was limited to non-design products. So you choose one or the other, they were non-design. They were not meant to be user-friendly, convenient, etc. They were meant to do a job. And probably it was all right in that time because India was learning to manufacture, right? But the moment this happened, there was a dire need of differentiation and improvement. And that's when people started to realize that if you design something better, there is a better chance of selling here as well as selling outside. And I think that's what sort of was a big turning point for Indian design. So whoever was already there, and we happened to already be there, really benefited from that. The other thing that happened is many of these MNCs who came to India, they started selling everything that they had in their other markets as is within India. And that fascination of imported or multinational companies' goods stayed for a little while, for a few years. But, as we say in India, we are like this only. So there is only certain thing that we will accept from outside cultures. But there are certain things that need to be aligned to the way we are, the way we live, the way we eat. So
And yet being more adaptive.
yes, we are adaptive, absolutely. But we still want, if you go back home, you'll still eat the kind of food you ate 20 years ago as well. So we don't change a lot of those things. If you look at the weddings, not much has changed in the rituals. I mean, it's only grown bigger, in fact. The pomp and show has grown bigger. So there are few very basic things that we don't change. I think India is also one of the few countries where, despite globalization, women still wear Indian wear. You will not find that anywhere. In any of the Asian countries that have gone through a similar journey, barring, let's say, Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, just this contingent of countries. Everywhere else, they are just wearing formal Western clothes. So what is it that has not, we have not changed? Why? There are few things we are not willing to change because we like them. They are comfortable for us. There is a limbic imprint that we don't want to let go. So the MNC started realizing that our products and services will not be fully adopted or loved by Indians unless we do some change, some alignment with what Indians want, the way they live, the way they perceive things, and so on, which was another great turning point for Indian design. Because then who was ready to do it? Who would be the right people to do it? And some of the MNCs tried bringing, their agencies from other countries, overseas, and, trying to get them to get insights in India and design for India and so on. But that didn't work well either.
Is that the time when Mac Aloo Tikki came in?
Probably.
Yeah.
That's the time when Mac came in and realized that, in India, we might have to do an outlet with just vegetarian food. I mean, the only one in the world, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely, that's the time when people started acknowledging that we can't just come with whatever we have and hope to sell in India. And so this adopting to Indian culture, adopting or aligning products and services to India is when, again, design came in the forefront. Because those companies were mature companies as far as design is concerned. They knew the value of design. They had used design in other countries. So all now they had to do is use design in India and from Indian designers if possible. And again, we were, whoever was at the right time, right place, again, could see the whole shift. That was the second one, I think, large turning point. And the third one is in the recent times, which is the technology.
Social media.
In India, no, even before that, social media, of course, has, it's exploded and done few things that we didn't ever imagine will happen. But little before that, Indian IT industry had created a good name for itself. So people were far more perceptive. There was far more acceptance to what India was doing in terms of technology. So I think that is another thing that benefited a lot of Indian designers who were working in the space of maybe animation, special effects, apps, and all of the world that's going on right now.
Net banking.
Oh yes, I think India has played a big role in that, and I believe all the big banks in the world have their centers working in India. So all of that happened, and I think IT did some good, carving the road for Indian design as well. So that's the third big change, I would say. And I don't know what the fourth one is going to be. I think it's around the corner.
Yeah, it seems like. With social media, you never know. In fact, me and my friend who's like almost become a monk now, we keep talking about how is India changing, and a lot of people who want to go outside India crib about India or things like that, right? So he puts it very nicely. He says that after say 150 or 200 years where the British partied in India, like imagine your house if a party happened for the entire night And in
Yeah.
the morning, if you see, it's all mess.
Yeah.
Someone has puked, someone has put the
Sure.
wrappers here and there. And first, I think, first 1 hour, it would be vacuuming and cleaning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if you compare that to India,
Hmm.
it's like 150 or 200 years of British Raj. And
And then the
everything was
cleaning up.
disrupted. Yeah, and now it's like 50 years you are just cleaning. Maybe now next 50 years you'll be doing some, which is also been seen as well, right?
True.
So
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting way to put it,
Yeah.
because now is probably the time to do your own expression.
Yeah,
So
a lot of at least, and what has become of because of the social media, like, there are a lot of echo chambers which are created.
yeah,
You resonate with what you are doing, and then you just keep following
absolutely,
on the same lines,
absolutely.
and you don't actually explore the other facets. But yeah, fortunately with AudioGAN, let's see where we go.
I mean, you're doing a great job. Yeah. It's really fantastic.
Thank you. Ashwini, last part of the conversation which
Yeah.
I wanted to speak about Elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us what were the, like you briefly touched upon, but if you can elaborate on what were the challenges when you started Elephant?
Okay.
Second is, what are the key projects that you do and how can people participate in that?
Mhm.
And maybe AudioGAN can help to reach few more people and contribute there. And lastly, this year, Elephant turned 30, right?
Yeah, we just
So,
turned 32 2 days ago.
Oh, wow, that's actually I should have released it before. Yeah. So yeah, first, what were the early challenges for Elephant Design?
So now we look.
And what I want to highlight here is that even AudioGAN is not a agency or a studio, but
Right.
it's in its early stage, right?
Yeah.
So I face some hurdles. Similarly,
Sure.
a lot of people are getting into podcasting. People are getting into
Yeah.
different avenues of bringing some impact
Right.
at their level, at
Yeah,
different
yeah,
levels, right?
yeah.
So I'm sure at an abstract level, the challenges will remain the same.
True.
So if you
I mean,
can,
anytime you want to do something new that has not been done abundantly before, there's been no path before, there is going to be a challenge. So I'd like to say two things. One is that, sometimes ignorance is bliss. So I don't think we had any idea as 22, 23-year-olds in 1989 what challenges lay ahead. So as I also said, expectations were very, very low. So it wasn't like we were going to be flushed with funds. There was no concept of outward funds or any such thing for a design consultancy. But early challenges, and you and I can both laugh at it now, because I think one of the biggest challenge we faced first was forming the company. We went to a CA because we had learned professional practice at NID, and we said we want to form this company. We went to the CA and we said, here is the idea and this is the company we want to do. So guess what the CA says? And I'm talking about Shukrawar Pet, 1989. He looks at all of us and he says, I think we should do partnership. So we said, okay, what is the other option? He said, private limited. So we said, why not? I mean, we were equally, ignorant to both. So we said, why not private limited and why a partnership? What's the difference and what's the reason? So he said, because, dissolving a private limited is very difficult. Partnership can be dissolved pretty easily. So that was the beginning, So there was no faith that a business like this is ever going to run. So our own CA was as encouraging as this is. Second one, we went to the bank. We had a project already and we were going to receive money. So we were told that as a business, you need to open a current account. So we went to a bank. Bank manager is very intrigued. These young bunch of people comes and says, want to open a current account. So he said he'd like to meet, which is a rare thing, it seems. In those days, bank managers used to be like kings and, they wouldn't meet. So we went inside his cabin and he says, so what do you do? Like, what are you going to do? So we said, design. We are designers and we've started this consultancy. So he said, why do you need a current account? So we said, because we are a business and businesses are supposed to have, current accounts. Yeah. He said, I don't think you're going to need so much. Current account is good if there are a lot of transactions. So that was the second one. So what I'm trying to tell you is there was no faith at all. I think the biggest challenge or the biggest support to any new business can be that people show faith in what you're doing. People trust you to do what you're doing and encourage you to do what you're doing. So I think that was the biggest challenge, that nobody believed. And this starts right from NID to Pune. Nobody believed that this thing can work. for various reasons. And I won't blame them now because maybe it was, they were right.
Yeah.
And it's not like we did anything to prove anyone wrong or prove anything at all. We were doing something because we enjoyed being with each other and doing design, and that's it. Getting a phone was very difficult in those days. It took us, I think, a year to get a phone.
Yeah.
So all
So it's
kinds
like
of
5-year waiting time sometimes.
yeah, and you know why we got it in 1 year? Because our first project got us some foreign exchange, and we realized that there's some category under which you can get a phone early if you have earned some foreign exchange, notwithstanding current account or whatever account. And after we gained that whatever foreign exchange, we went to the telephone exchange, filled a new form, and they gave it to us in a few months. So, yeah, I mean, these were now we laugh at them and we say, nobody even understands what's a landline. So, not getting one phone for 1 year is like, who can comprehend what it means? But I think more than that, what really was challenging was to tell anybody, how will design help? Why should somebody design? Why should somebody hire a designer to do anything at all? Because design makes a positive difference is a fact probably discussed today, but is still not proved in terms of numbers. Despite the 30, 40, 50 years of design in India, we don't have case studies which prove through numbers that before design and after design, this is the difference. So those days, of course, there were no case studies. Today, at least we have a few cases where people say, yeah, design made a difference. How much % of difference? Probably not known. But I think there was nothing to prove that design could help, except our own internal faith. And we were told at NID that good design is profit. So that's the only line we used to tell everybody, that, good design is never expensive, because whatever you're investing is your capital investment, and whatever you will get is your profit, which will be more than what you would have got if you didn't do design intervention. So I think that was the biggest challenge, how to sort of convey that design will make a good difference. That was the initial challenge, I think. That's really how I would put it.
Yeah.
So coming to your second question, I think.
Which is any key projects which have impacted, or you are referring to the old age problem which you're trying to do. Similarly, on those lines, any noteworthy projects which Elephant has done?
So I think one is that when you're trying to do a social impact project, the best thing is to not talk about it. But
no, this is not obviously like, now you know that I am not.
But I'll tell you a philosophy we have about social impact projects, and that is why we managed to do them and continue to do them. And I'll tell you a few of the names as well. So about 10 or 12 years ago, Rockefeller Foundation had convened a workshop at their campus in Italy on design for social impact. And they actually invited about 15 designers from around the world. And I happened to be invited there. And over 2 or 3 days, I think we discussed how designers can actually help social impact projects. And not many designers were coming forward. So what was the reason? What is the way in which we can involve more designers in social impact? This is what Rockefeller was interested in knowing. And we were one of the couple of the few people from emerging countries. The rest were all from developed world, from Europe and US and so on. So along the way, we figured a lot of methods and processes on how things could happen better. But one thing that we all came out with, which was, we all took 3 pledges. And we said, this is what we'll implement in our everyday life. So the first pledge, and I think that's the most relevant one for any of us or anyone who's listening, everybody wants to do good. But where do you begin? The world is full of very large problems, like world hunger, oil spillage in oceans, fossil fuels getting over. These are very large problems. Yeah, so I was talking about these. So world is full of big problems, right? So where do you begin? What is the way? What is the first step? So the first pledge that I took was that, no problem is small or big to solve. So you have to begin at your backyard. Our backyards are full of problems. So through design, if we can solve even a smallest of problems, it's worth it. Even if you make improvement in one person's life using design or design thinking, it's worth it. Nothing is big or small. We are not doing it for getting Nobel Prizes. We are doing it for making a positive difference, right? So that was my first pledge, that start at the backyard, look at your backyard problems. Second was that, see, we are a commercial organization. I mean, we have people working for us, we do commercial projects, we get fees are paid to us, we have to pay salaries, so it's a commercial venture. But every commercial project, if you start looking for an opportunity to ride something which impacts positively, there is an opportunity if you look. So the most commercial project will also provide you probably one tiny opportunity to do something better, which has a social impact beyond the commercial impact. If you're able to find that and tell that client that beyond what we are doing for you, which we are going to do really well, we can also do this and it will have a social impact. Are you willing to look at it? Almost no client in the world will say no. Because everybody actually wants to do good. There is dearth of ideas, or there is dearth of time, or there is a myth that there is dearth of resources. There are resources and people can spend those. But sometimes they don't have ideas given to them at the right time. So we said maybe not 100% of the projects that we do, but at least a sizable number of projects where there is an opportunity that can be identified and we can ride on it and tell the client that let's do this beyond this. So that's the second pledge, that we will piggyback on a commercial project to do some social impact wherever possible.
Is it like the CRM thing?
No, so in those days there was no CRM being discussed. Sorry. I mean, I'm sure people were doing some good stuff, but it wasn't like a compulsory spend some of your whatever resources on doing good. But I'll just give you an example. So in those days, we were working a lot on some Procter & Gamble projects, and they also had an initiative called Shiksha, which was for school children. And we managed to ladder up a few ideas around that Shiksha initiative, along with the projects that we were working on. And it sailed through really well, and we were able to impact through those projects. And that sort of gave us the confidence that you go to any corporate who's for profit, also wants to do good. So then we of course did a few initiatives with Britannia, where they even went on to form Britannia Nutrition Foundation, which was also one of the ideas that came through brainstorming along with them, that what is the manner in which they could do social impact work. So this was another big success. So there were many such possibilities, and we pushed wherever it was possible. So that was my second pledge. And the third pledge is doing well by doing good. Okay. So there is this belief that if you are into social impact work, there is no way that you're going to do well commercially. And that's a myth, right? I mean, a lot of people have proved that now. In the recent times, social impact doesn't mean a jhola and, a khadi kurta and running in under the sun. It also means many other positive things. So that was the third one, that we try and find opportunities, try and whatever you're doing, do good. So don't, just by not doing anything negative is also creating a social impact.
Correct.
So that's really how we look at doing anything at Elephant.
And if people have to contribute or join you guys, volunteer.
So that's a difficult one because we don't have like formal initiatives as such. So like I said, along the way, every project that forms an opportunity.
So right now it's within the team itself.
But there are a lot of doing good kind of organizations that approach us. So it's not possible to work with all of them, but we do work with some of them. And like I said, backyard, we even worked with Baudhan Manch. I mean, they came to us and said, you are located in Baudhan. Baudhan Nagri Manch is actually just a bunch of community that lives around there. And they said, we want to create posters for segregation of wet waste and dry waste. So can you help us? And we said, of course. I mean, this is exactly what we would do because this is a backyard problem. The positive impact of that, whatever that is, will be visible right away and it will also benefit us. So why would we not do something like this? And it's small and you will never see it making headlines anywhere, but it actually made a difference and that makes us feel good, right? So that's doing good, doing well, both of it. So if anybody wants to work on any of this, I mean, within the Elephant team, it's voluntary again. So
Cool. So yeah, last concluding line. First of all, like congratulations for turning 30, and like it's a media type question, but how does it feel? And what's the future with Elephant Design?
So how does it feel is very difficult to say in one or two lines or sentences. But I think one word I would say, and I am not going to mince words, we feel very proud
Mm-hmm.
that we believe we made design in India happen. And I think that's a great feeling because, yeah, it's almost like nothing of this scale, this consistency, this persistence, perseverance in design field had happened before. Though that was not the intention. We kept running the way we loved running, but we turned around and saw that not many people were following, unfortunately. So proud is the feeling now at 30. And there's a bit of a concern also, I think, because design as a profession has not grown as much as it should have grown. Any profession for 30 years, 40, 50 years, if it's around in a country, it should have seen a very different kind of growth. It should have actually been a mainstream profession, but it has not happened. And it's time to examine why. And that's also one of the reasons why not just me, but many of us in Elephant spend time to go out and talk about what we do, how we do. We open out our processes, we open out our case studies, and we say, this is what is design. Let's not create mysteries around it. Let's demystify. Let's make it open and simple and transparent. Design is not some fancy word. It's something that's actually going to help all of us. So that's another thing. The concern is also there. I really would have liked to see design as a profession being far bigger and more impacting than it is today.
I did one interview with Professor Aniruddha Joshi from IDC.
Yeah.
And he mentioned those were like really rough figures, and again 2 years back. But what he said was that in India, as we need like for 10 people, you need one doctor. Just an example. Similarly, you need X person for one designer, right? For one designer and X person, right?
Community. Yeah.
So he said like we may have around 20 to 30,000 designers, and probably we need million.
True.
Yeah,
True. Very
yeah.
true. So that has not happened, and it's very difficult for that to happen because even though there are so many design institutes coming up, there aren't enough design teachers. You know, so the problem is not just of building, constructing institutes or building campuses. The problem is much bigger, which is getting faculty that can actually create good designers.
And on top of that, well-learned faculty.
Yes,
as well.
faculty is the biggest challenge right now. So I think, but it'll get there hopefully. Million, I don't know, but I think we should be getting to a few lakh at least.
No, but overall, this is separate AudioGyan altogether. Education and design. Hopefully, I'm meeting Dhiman Panchal tomorrow.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to talk to him about.
Great.
Yeah.
So Dhiman was a professor at NID when we were studying, and we have a great regard for him and great regard for the energy he displays even now, which is very remarkable, very inspiring. So the other thing that 30 years, the other question, which even before you ask, I think I need to answer this, which is what next? So we've come this far, but there's a very interesting saying, which is, you didn't come this far to come this far. Okay, so you came this far because you had to actually get somewhere else, which is far ahead. So I think we have to make that happen. We have to make an Indian design company respected globally, and I think that's going to happen only if we do positive impact projects within India and emerging markets. And there is a lot to do, and I hope we get to do a lot of that as well. The other thing is the new front line is ready at Elephant. So the old front line has to take a back seat and the new one has to come in. The new ideas have to come in. We have to see what is their vision, because it cannot only be the founder's vision that can, see a company go forever. So if we've made something which is built to last, it will last only if newer visions get added to it. Just like the elephant story of blind people and big picture, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's the next.
All right. I'm like, just given the time a podcast is supposed to be, otherwise this conversation can go on and on. Okay, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, Ashwini, there's lots more to talk about. I would like to have you again on AudioGyan to
Sure, love to come.
discuss more bits about. Maybe we can brainstorm on what we can document and share with
Sure.
budding designers.
Sure.
And it was really wonderful talking to
Thank you so much. I
Thank
had
you
a great
once-
time
yeah.
chatting with you.
Thank you
All
once
the
again.
best to Audio Gyan
Yeah.
and always there for you.
Thank you.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.
Hello! It's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On This Round is on Me, Gauri is joined by Shweta Nanda. They talk about the financial independence and how it is to be a woman entrepreneur. On Anish Thing, Anish welcomes ultra-marathon runner Shivani Gharat. Shivani shares her journey of how she ran her first marathon, the mindset of a runner, and what it actually takes to run a full marathon. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Naveen, Akash and Shreyas talk about the Korean band BTS serving in the military and its repercussions. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita discuss Wing Greens and their latest acquisitions and about the Indian sexual wellness market. And on Shunya One, Sheila Datya is joined by Dinika Bhatia, CEO and founder of Nuttigritties. They talk about coming from a business family and Dinika's journey in creating healthy and guilt-free snacking. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcasts.com. We have some exciting new merch out there for you. Also, do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And do remember to spread the word about these shows and any other shows you might be listening to. Appreciate them, rate them, and review them wherever you are listening to them. You can also check out all our other shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. Volvo XC40 Recharge, Bumble, Heads Up for Tails, Kotak Privy League Program, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thanks guys, without you this would not be possible.
Do you often find yourself surrounded by conversations about Web3, blockchain, NFTs, DAOs? What are these terms and how do they affect our future on the internet? So many questions, but don't worry, we've got answers to all your questions. Hi, I'm Eklavya Bhattacharya, and on our show Future Proofing, we try to decode the impact of these future technologies on various industries with experts and tech enthusiasts. Tune into new episodes coming out every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app and the website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.